Growing up in the 2000s and 2010s, there's certain movies that have stuck in my brain like nobody's business. I don't know what scriptwriters were on at the time, but man, they were just making anything. And it was kinda awesome. We're talking your Pacific Rims, your Real Steels, the dawn of the MCU. You had a surplus of movies that were handmade for me and every other 10-year-old boy at the time. And while I look back on that era and these movies fondly, there's one film from back then that seems to be more popular now than when it came out. In the middle of the biggest year for superhero movies, this movie was about racing and grief, and a monkey they kept putting in human clothes. And if you can't tell, I'm talking about Speed Racer. I distinctly remember loving this movie as a kid. It was colorful and fast-paced. There was comedy, but also heart, race cars that went fast, and a monkey. Did I say that already? I mean, look at this guy. Where Real Steel and Pacific Rim got a collective hell yeah out of me and my dad at the movie theater, I'm pretty sure Speed Racer got like a eh. And that sentiment seemed to be the consensus around this film for the longest time. Speed Racer was both a social and economic flop. A lot of people really didn't like this movie. It wasn't until very recently where I feel like I've seen the opinion on this film completely change. Now we have things like TikTok edits, YouTube videos, and podcasts where it's like 10% review and 90% gambling at. So what changed? How did Speed Racer go from box office flop to kind of a cult classic? What happened in 2008 for this film to get so widely misunderstood? This is our main character, Speed. Speed cares about one thing and one thing only: racing. Pretty apt name if I do say so. I guess it's good he didn't grow up to be like an accountant. Growing up, Speed idolized his older brother Rex, a talented racer who seemingly fell in with the wrong crowd. More on that later. After nuking his reputation with overly aggressive driving, Rex mysteriously dies in an explosion during a dangerous cross-country rally, leaving Speed and his family forever changed. From that moment on, Speed dedicates the rest of his life to becoming the absolute best of the best in the racing industry, and eventually he does just that. Race after race, qualifier after qualifier, Speed proves himself to not only be a competent successor to his family's once great legacy, but an arguably even better driver than his late brother. With these all-star performances comes all-star attention, and on the precipice of his success, Speed is introduced to capitalism. This freaky little British guy is like, "Oi Speed, come race for me, yeah?" Speed's like, "Nah, I don't know, man, I race for my family, thanks though." And the British guy's like, "If you don't drive for me, I'll kill you." And Speed's like, "I thought this was a kid's movie." From here on out, the movie completely shifts, going from a light story about a kid chasing greatness to an underdog story where Speed aims to expose the criminal underbelly of his sport, eventually teaming up with the founder of Aura Farming and a cop to take down not only the British purple guy, but the mobster who played a role in his brother's death. This culminates in Speed participating in that same cross-country rally, and the stakes have never been higher. Luckily though, this time around, no one dies. Unless you count these ninjas. One of them gets thrown off a building and the other one gets literally folded in half, so I don't know if they made it. Ultimately though, Speed and the gang end up taking down the mobsters and winning the rally. What's important is he ends up getting the invitation to the biggest race of all time, the Grand Prix. Biggest and also most rigged. But I'm gonna go ahead and spoil the 18-year-old kids movie. Speed wins, like shockingly easily. I'm not kidding, there's a part where his car completely stops and he still ends up gapping second place, who I guess showed up in a Dodge Neon. Though Rex may not be there to see it, Speed stands proud, having won the Prix and defeated the corruption behind it, cementing himself as the greatest living racer, while Pops, Mom, Trixie, Sparky, Spritle, and Chim Chim are all right there with him. I'm lying, by the way. Rex, he's fine. He got a little Botox and murdered a ninja, so I guess he's doing good. So while the plot is important, it's not really what I want to talk about today. Instead, I want to take time to focus on the aspect of this film that seems to be the most widely criticized, especially at the time it came out, that being the way it looks. As you can probably tell from B-roll alone, Speed Racer is a heavily stylized film. During its production, the Wachowski Sisters, the directors of this film, chose to rely heavily, pretty much almost entirely, on things like CGI and green screens. Kind of a bold decision considering this movie came out in 2008 and a lot of people hated it. Almost every 1 and 2-star review on IMDb specifically makes reference to the visual style and breakneck editing pace of this movie, and in some aspects, they're kinda right. Some of the CGI does look a little off. Some of the green screens can look a little funky. There's multiple points in this movie where John Goodman's eyeline is like 2 feet above whoever he's talking to. However, I think if you sprinkle in a little historical context, these choices start to make a lot more sense. And if anything, I think Speed Racer's entire look is very intentional. Let me explain. All the way back in 1966, this guy Tatsuo Yoshida created the manga Mach GoGoGo, and a year later in 67, it would go on to get its animated debut. This is Speed Racer, by the way. I feel like I probably should say that. Now, obviously, it's the 1960s. They didn't exactly have Best Buy pre-builds, so in terms of animation, they were getting down and dirty by hand through a process called cell animation. It's a more traditional style of 2D animation where artists would create isolated drawings on these things called celluloid sheets. When you're making an animation, you have to draw a lot. From what I can find, for a show like Mach GoGoGo, they animated at 24 frames a second. That means depending on the timing that the animators used in that scene, we could be looking at anywhere between like 8 and 24 drawings in a single second, and there's kind of a lot of those in a half hour. Let's say hypothetically I had a scene of Speed standing in front of some trees and I wanted to animate him smiling. If I were to animate on ones, that would mean a new drawing for every single frame of the second. I don't want to have to redraw everything in this picture just to get Speed to smile. So how about instead, I take my composition and I break it apart into layers. Now I can put my background trees on a static background plate. In the context of my scene, Speed's body and his arms don't really need to move. So on my first celluloid sheet, I'll draw his torso and I'll lock that in place for the next 24 frames. Now finally, all I have to do is draw 24 different versions of Speed's head going from not smiling to smiling. Stacking these cells on top of each other, that's cell animation. Then all you gotta do is take a picture and somehow get that picture into the TV. That could have been magic. I don't. By isolating characters and assets instead of redrawing everything, you not only save on time, but it becomes much easier to consistently make more complex and detailed compositions. Oh yeah, compositions, compositing. It's when you do this part. Why are we talking about animation techniques? Well, one, because it's cool, but mainly because I'm kind of thinking this is exactly what Speed Racer did. Think about it, compositing is also a thing in film, and it's the same idea. If we take some stock footage of a guy in front of a green screen, we put him on the beach, and I don't know, we make it rain, that's compositing. Both of these processes are compositing. And so my mind goes to, what if this is what they were going for with Speed Racer? Not just homage, not just a movie based on some source material, but a literal live action adaptation of an anime, even down to how the anime was produced. That's next level nerd shit, and from an editing standpoint, it's absolutely the flex they thought it was. But these visual similarities don't just stop at compositing. I'm not gonna assume you've watched anime, but if you have, you'd know there's certain visual staples to the genre. Scene transitions, whips, pans, zooms, on-screen effects, sound effects, all your classic cartoon shit. Speed Racer 2008 has them too. What I'm trying to say is that when you're watching Speed Racer and you see a scene like this, your first thought might be, that looked a little weird, and that's totally fine. So how do we reconcile that feeling of weirdness when what you're looking at is trying to look like that? And if anything, took a shit ton of work to get that way. Well, if you're the world in 2008, you don't. Like I said earlier, Speed Racer flopped. It didn't even make its money back. I know it's not the most popular IP in the world, but bro, it's the directors of The Matrix. Do you remember when the original Spider-Verse came out and the worst person you knew was like, yeah, I don't know, man, it looks kind of weird. And then you were like, it was the frame rate. They actually used a lower frame rate. It's actually kind of cool. And then he like punched you in the face and gave you a wedgie, and then everybody kind of like made fun of you, and then, no? Alright, my bad. Judging off its IMDb reviews, Speed Racer 2008 was kind of like that. A lot of people did not like the visual style, but the movie definitely had a fan base even on release. Box office just wasn't hearing it that year. But do you know what never looks like the next big thing? The next big thing. You see, under all the criticism comes a kind of existential question. At what point does artistic intention triumph subjective enjoyment? Like, when does the fact that I meant for it to look like that mean more than you not liking how it looks? I guess how much should an audience's enjoyment of your style impact the work's reputation? One might say, well, a lot. If a bunch of audiences think your movie looks like ass, it probably looks like ass. But look at Speed Racer. A bunch of audiences thought it looked like ass, 15 years passed by, and now hey, it looked pretty cool. There's so many ever-changing variables that play into the reception of a piece of media. Culture, current events, who's watching, whatever. You could show the same movie to the same group every 5 years, and I bet they respond differently every time. Because of course they would. That's how time works. The Wachowskis saw this. They made something unconventional, but true to their idea. And from what I've seen of the show, respectful to the source material. Not only that, but they made something entertaining. Yes, maybe not for adults in 2008 as their savings disappear, but for 6-year-old me, yeah, they saw me and I saw them. Speed Racer was misunderstood, temporarily. Does it look a little goofy at times? Yes, obviously, yes, it looks a little goofy at times, but you know what? They left it all on the court, and who am I to hate on somebody's game? Other than the Duffer Brothers, my bad boys, that one really took off. You can't predict the future, so just try to be true to yourself, especially when you're doing something like making art. Sure, people might not get it now, but give it 15 years. Their kids are gonna love it. You see what I did there? You see what I did? Thank you for watching my video. Huge shout out to Snaj for this incredible beat, and I will see you in the next one.